Okay, so we are recording January 15th, and we are doing our crystal ball. And this was a crystal ball, by the way, that has been delayed now twice. So thank you everyone for your seemingly ability to put up with my inability to understand basic time zones and how timing works. But we wanted to have this actually at the end of your recap. This is a bit different than what we normally do. We usually do bi-weekly sessions where we cover kind of hard legal topics. And to be sure, we did a poll on this. We're going to be doing tax next. And we're going to follow that with an assignment talk. So we're going to be back to the hard-hitting stuff very shortly. But for now, we wanted to have just a freewheeling conversation with some industry experts from various fields, talk about what 2021 might look like. I'm going to let everyone individually introduce themselves. I think that's actually the best way of doing it. But the one thing I would note is that we have replaced Lang, who was going to be here. And as you guys know, he's one of the administrators of our group. He's a great guy, but he happens to be off gallivanting around the other side of the world. And in his place, we have actually, it's a real treat, Andrew Brunner. And Andrew, someone I know very well, but Andrew is not only a broker, high-performing broker, but, and I'm sorry, I'm letting everyone else introduce themselves. I'm going to give special attention to Andrew for a second, just because he's a recent addition. Andrew also runs Condo Mapper, which means that he's uniquely suited to also talk to us about prop tech and the technological developments that are going to take place in 2021, particularly given that we're all still sitting at home, are probably remarkable as well. And we have an expert that can speak to that as well. So without further ado, maybe what I can do is just ask everyone to take 1 minute, tell everyone about themselves, and then we're going to start into our conversation. Reaza, if you want to begin, please feel free.
Sure. Ask the new guy first, right, Mark? Well, thanks, everyone. I really appreciate you inviting me onto this. My name is Reaza Ali. I am actually the broker relations manager for Fisgard. As you can see my banner behind me. We're a private lending mortgage investment corporation. Me personally, I've been in the industry approximately 22 years now. Started way back with household finance, HSBC finance, did some commercial lending, financial planning, and insurance. And over the last 6 years, I've found myself on the alternative lending space, and I've spent most of my career in the alternative lending space. So again, currently private lending primarily, work with all the great mortgage brokers throughout Ontario and Canada out to BC with my partner, Hallie Noble. And as far as I'm concerned, working with our mortgage broker channel in Canada is a very interesting view on things, because we get to see absolutely everything and capture all of the market. But again, thank you very much for having me on there, and that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you, Reaza. Andrea, hit it up. Most people on this channel know you, but go ahead. Let's do this.
So Andrea Jolly, I'm a mortgage broker. I have now been in lending for 20 years. So I spent just about 10 years with TD, and that, doing the financial advisor role, and then mortgage manager role. And then I've gone into the broker channel, and I have, as we like to call it, instead of a small brokerage, it's a boutique brokerage of very high performing mortgage brokers. So the one thing that I really enjoy is working with people like Reaza, because 10 years ago, there was a certain client that went to private lending, and I think that's a really important part of this conversation. That's no longer that case. These are doctors, lawyers. Like, it's amazing to see what's in the private lending space that's really not included in a lot of the discussion that we deal with. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Tremendous. Richard, you're up, man.
I'm Richard Goldhar. I'm a licensed insolvency trustee. So I work with individuals and corporations to restructure debt. Last year was the quietest year we've ever had in 20 years. Filing numbers were down 70% on the practice.
Richard, I'm sorry. It's very hard to hear you.
Is it better now?
It is, yes.
Okay, sorry. So I was saying I'm a licensed insolvency trustee. We run an Ontario-based practice. We have 17 offices across the province of Ontario. Last year in 2020 was our slowest year. Our file volumes were down 70%. Um, and our corporate practice was actually getting busier. So we've done more receivership work for land development deals that have gone south, for condo projects that have gone south. So we're definitely seeing a lot of an uptick with regards to private lending, having issues getting out of their projects on the commercial space.
Terrific. Andrew, please, after you.
Yes, so my name is Andrew Brunner. I've been in real estate for about, well, since 2005, end of the year, and I've seen it come in waves where there's a really hot seller's market, slow buyer's market. And, you know, I was part of the original fleet of agents doing the online prop tech back in 2005 in its infant stage. And slowly it's evolved and gotten to the point where at this moment, it's one of the easiest platforms you could use to generate business. So I would suggest that I'm part of the original fleet. I don't know if that means anything, but I've seen any monkey with a keyboard could rank a site back then. Let's put it that way.
Terrific. All right, guys. Well, look, I'm thrilled that we're all together because we all come from very diverse backgrounds. And I think on a general statement, which I think everyone will agree with, 2020 was quite a year. It was quite a year in unexpected ways because the real estate market created ample opportunity for those of us who practice in it, and did not have the deleterious effects on a lot of Canadians that perhaps we were expecting. I'm going to first turn today's conversation to Richard, and I'm going to ask perhaps why that was. Was that due to government largesse, the ability to postpone mortgages? Was that due to the CERB payments? And given that those programs have now ended, how do you see matters changing in the market such that, which is obviously going to affect real estate because real estate is predicated upon what people can pay?
Yes, thank you, Mark. So I would say currently you might see an increase in the marketplace with pricing. We do think that from the trustee's perspective in our industry, that's short-lived. We believe that people have yet to feel the effects of losing their jobs or companies downsizing, because although CERB has come to an end and mortgage deferrals on the whole have come to an end, employers are still getting their CEWS payments. So they haven't done their massive layoffs that they're going to be required to do. And there's still no evictions, and there's a lot of government help to corporations, and to the most part, even to individuals. So although the ability for banks to foreclose has started, from their high levels, what they're telling to the trustee community is they're being told to stand back, stand off, and don't enforce at this time. Another thing that we're starting to see is when clients are coming to us in the past, often they'd say, do I do a proposal, or can I go to a mortgage broker and refinance my property even through a private lender? And right now we're not seeing the money flowing in that direction. So people are often not getting reapproved for a new second or even a first.
So is it a function then of stigma that is precluding these larger banks and everyone else from actively enforcing while people are down, like kicking a can while it's down? Does that mean that come August on stage 3, when vaccination goes wide scale and we are all vaccinated and things are back to normal and our eye is off the ball, that we can expect the deleterious effects that we were expecting from last year to actually finally weigh in as a result, outside of the massive government debt that we've accumulated? Is it that time that we are then going to start seeing the consumers be affected in your mind?
I think we're expecting Q4 of 2021, because again, Qs is already approved to June 30th of 2021 with an expectation of an additional 3 months. So companies need to lose their Qs and the courts need to open. So right now it's very hard to get into court, even on an enforcement action. So like I said, we're right now in the process of doing a receivership of a land deal that's in Hamilton.
Right.
And to be honest with you, it's been 2 months to set a date just for a returnable date to get a receivership application approved. And we know that the first has tried power sale proceedings and they can't even get in.
Can I ask one more question of you? And Reaza, perhaps you want to weigh in on this one as well. I've heard from quite a few sources, and maybe Andrew, you maybe know as well. Please, anyone chime in. But I've heard that the past year has been a boon to Canadian savings. Are you finding that that is in fact the case in people's pocketbooks? Richard, Reaza, and Andrew, you might very well know this just from the data that's been assembled. I've heard this. I have no. That's all anecdotal. Can you guys weigh in on that?
I can go first, and then I'll let everybody go after me. So we are very closely related to 2 large collection agencies, and they will say they've had record years with collecting money against debt. Obviously, there are people out there who have taken advantage of the government situations, and until April of 2021, we won't know really who they are. So anybody that's collected the CEBA, the CERB, that don't qualify, and there's going to be a requirement for repayment, we don't know who that is, but in the interim, they had cash. So some of them had as little as $2,000 per month, where others had 6 people living in their home, and they had $12,000 to $15,000 a month in their rent they weren't paying because they've been told by governments don't pay their rents, don't pay their mortgages, they've deferred everything. So what we're seeing is it's a very sort of temporary influx in cash, but it's because they've deferred all sorts of other debt. So there wasn't enough to bring down the debt level. I believe Statistics Canada just released their number, and in fact, the amount of debt people have per dollar that they're earning is actually up to a record number of $1.72, up from last year of $1.64.
Interesting. Reaza, are you finding the same?
Yeah, that's interesting, Richard. And we're seeing the same thing. And as far as the data and the speaking of the data, so there's a couple of things that happened initially with the deferral that was offered. I believe lenders as a whole, especially the big 5, people were inundating them. In some cases, they were getting 20, 30,000 calls a week for requests to defer. And initially, it was a lump sum deferral of 6 months. Some of the lenders smartened up to that, and others kind of stepped back immediately and said, okay, how are we going to handle this? And a lot decided to go month by month and then inquire with the client as they started coming through. So I heard instances where, and I think this will speak to Richard's point, where it was a temporary thing. People were actually taking advantage of that offering. They didn't need it. And instead of paying on their mortgage, they were paying down some debt initially or utilizing that money for other resources. But overall, I would say the deferral of the payments, what we saw as a lender initially, yes, there was a bit of a spike in requests. I would say the following month and months after that, the requests went to half and then really went to very little in our book of business. And so it wasn't a great impact. And that was seemed to be a message across the board with many of the bank and monoline lenders that we spoke with as well as the other MIC operators in our space. We were seeing the same thing. So when it comes to, are people paying down debt? Are they accumulating more? I'm seeing it 2 ways. It depends on the psychology of that person and how they handled their debt in the first place. If they were spending their money as it was coming through, I don't see them necessarily making such a shift in mindset that it's going to take them away from that. So I think, again, to Richard's point, on the other side of the equation, I think later on, we probably will see his business peak again, probably towards the end of the year.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes some sense. Andrea, how are you finding that is affecting qualifications? How are you finding, how are clientele different? Let me just ask bluntly, because I don't want to structure your answer. How are you finding clients are different now as we begin 2021 than 2020, given what has just been said by Richard and Reaza?
Yeah, it sounds like there was an accumulation. Oh, sorry, was that for Andrea or me?
There's too many Andrew.
Because I heard
it was for Andrea, but Andrew, I have a question for you right after.
Sorry.
This whole time. You just look too nice in that turtleneck. I just want people to absorb the picture for a while, and then we're going to come to you.
So from my end, and for the whole broker channel, it has been an extremely busy end of 2020. We're still extremely active considering normally this is our slow time. What we're seeing is the same people that were qualifying a year ago are qualifying now. And the reason why is because they have co-signers. Most of the realtors that are on this call would know if they've got a first-time buyer, they need a parent to co-sign. They need a larger down payment. If you make 90 or 100 grand, you can barely qualify for a $500,000 condo with 5 or 10% down, right? So the people that are mostly affected by what was going on with COVID weren't ones that were highly qualifying for mortgages anyways. And that's why we've had this crazy year. We're also seeing, again, that the people who need that extra space, because while they were happy to be in Toronto, they want a little bit more space now. They need that, right? If they're going to be home working from home. So we're getting a lot of those requests. Now, qualifying wise, like I said, if you were in a home and you've made money on that home, there's a lot of different options that we have to get you into another property. Lenders are looking at, and I think there is going to be sticker shock over the next 2 to 3 years when people who defer their mortgages, who didn't need to, realize that it's not gone, it's just tacked on to the end of your mortgage. So now instead of your maturity being 400,000, it could be 425 or 430. And now, do you qualify for that? And do you have to stay with your lender? Can you move? There's going to be a little bit more restrictions than we thought. Also in the B lending space, so not your typical Scotia or TD, but in the B lending space, if you took CERB, they're trying to figure out if you qualified for it. So they're coming up with spreadsheets where they look at what you collected through your business accounts, and then they're saying you shouldn't have been collecting CERB, or this assistance. So we're actually going to make sure that we're paying that out as a part of as a requirement. So I do find B lenders and A lenders are trying to be somewhat proactive on what that sticker shock is going to look like. Also, again, I can't stress this enough, the fact that the first-time buyer market is, depending on where you are in the GTA, anywhere before COVID was anywhere between 23 and 26% needing assistance from parents, and that's the ones we know about. It's just going to continue to compound. So if your parents were renters, you purchasing is going to be, I really don't see how that's going to work in your favor unless you graduate and you're an engineer, or you've got this really high income. That's, to me, the underlying fear is that we've taken out that ability to save your 5% and purchase a house. Yeah,
right.
It's becoming brutal.
Interesting. So with everyone's permission, just because I really want to use everyone's skill sets, I'm going to turn from the financing of Canadians to their increasing use of technology and the platforms that we as realtors are also employing in order to facilitate being able to sit at home on our rears for the next, 6 months or however long. And there's no better person to talk to about that than Andrew. By the way, Andrea, that wasn't to say that I don't have follow-up questions. It's just you answered very completely. So I'm not sure that there's much I could add to what you just said. So I'm going to just switch. I'm going to switch. And Andrew, I'm going to ask you, can you tell us what it is we can expect? Most of us are realtors on this channel. Can you tell us firstly what realtors are looking to expect in the coming year in terms of technological rollouts and assists, the new data that may become available? And more importantly, can you tell us what consumers may actually be able to avail themselves of? I mean, last year, I think, was the year of House Sigma, where suddenly people realized that they can do a better job going to a random brokerage than MLS. What is in store for 2021?
Well, yeah, I mean, with House Sigma, for instance, if I have 10 buyers during the year at one time, I'll get files directly from the House Sigma website from them. At least 5 or 6 out of the 10 are going to send me links to House Sigma. So that tells you immediately that buyers are actually looking on private portals, because the value they're getting and the data sets that are being stacked on those portals are vastly superior to what they could find on Treb or on the Korea sites or anything, any of the legacy websites that the boards have been using. So you have a few prop tech founders that are using very interesting combinations of data sets. And then what they're doing is distilling the information into one hard fact that is of value to the consumer. And what's happening, they're also creating a better user experience. So whereas you might go on Treb's website and everything, it takes a little longer to find what you need. The silo of the site is a little more broken. You might go on House Sigma and you'll be able to learn the sold data within 2 seconds, right? So the idea in 2021, I believe up till now, all the websites, the private portals have been 2D and very flat. I think the next wave of innovation is going to come in immersiveness. So a lot of these new upstarts and funded prop techs, what they're going to start doing is creating an immersive experience on the site. And what that's going to do is build an affinity with the buying pool that is actively searching, and a good portion of the business coming this year in 2021 is going to be channeled through these web portals. So I think that there's going to be a big grab of the pie from these sites, and the traditional open houses that we can't even structure at this point are going to go away. So even if we wanted to do an open house this weekend, we can't, because we're on lockdown. So I think realtors in general, they're going to be looking for alternate methods to, I mean, I'm hearing stories from colleagues where pre-construction sales centers are sometimes hard to get into, or they're doing Zoom meetings prior to it and getting things sold just on a Zoom meeting. So, I mean, we're going to have to get creative in 2021. And there's a lot of opportunity because there hasn't been a lot of innovation up till now.
So one of the things I've always marveled at in real estate is the different silos that exist of data. So my legal silo, well, frankly, who cares about that? Lawyers are terrible with data, but we do maintain a restrict technology that has no platform that really integrates except through perhaps a third-party website like FCT with a broker. A broker has their own distinct source, which doesn't actually necessarily interact with insurance or lender. And the realtors, of course, desirous of all these data nodes, don't have any, for lack of a better term, APIs into the other various silos that exist. My question to you, and Reaza, this would be for you and Andrea as well. Richard, don't feel I'm leaving you out. I'll come to you with my next question. To what degree do we find that the individual silos that we've all inhabited for so many decades are actually starting to merge? Are we finding that actually realtors are having better and better data to perhaps the private lending space? Is the private lending space in any way sharing data with the broker channel outside of the need to know basis of, oh yeah, I have money for you because you've submitted an application? Are these things starting to break down? Is that a story in 2021? And I'd encourage anyone to answer. Richard, you too, but I suspect that this is a bit separate from your silo. But the other three, is there any answer to that question? I've always wondered that.
Yeah, I think you're going to see, and we have already been seeing merging of data and technology, new technology platforms coming out. You know, I joked at the end of the year that I think this year I've probably worked on, or past year, 10 different technology platforms that I didn't even know existed or were created. Now, from our perspective as a lender, you know, for Andrea as an example, to send us a file, there are a number of platforms that she can hit the submit button to, and that file can come to us electronically. Were we on there before? Were the private lenders as a whole on there before? The answer was not necessarily, no. And a vast group of us weren't. But there's value there from efficiencies, from data integrity, protection of the client information itself, transferring from our mortgage broker, being Andrea, to ourselves. There's a whole host of reasons why it's a good thing. So we are seeing a lot of information being transferred over. We're able to track all of that information. And at any point in time, we can report back to our broker partners. And I do that on a monthly basis on the national level, but we can break that down to individual level as well. So it is very useful.
And critically, because it's all well and good to track data. It's all well and good to use electronic systems. But as Andrew will argue, if I hadn't said this now, aggregating the data for macro data analysis is really where the value of prop tech and technology generally comes in. Is there aggregation tools that are now available to you in the private lending space?
So I wouldn't say as a whole, this would be from lender to lender and how they utilize that data within their own organizations. To then go and share that amongst each other, that's I wouldn't say that's readily available. Some hold that very, very close to their chest. We belong to a number of different associations of regulated, recognized lenders, and within those organizations, we share our aggregated data. And the purpose of that, though, is to also get ahead of any conversations. You know, you may have other organizations or individuals searching for data. Are they looking in the right space for it? Are they coming to the experts in that space for it? Or are they just asking anyone within the lending space, which is not going to give you accurate data? So we want to get ahead of those conversations and give the accurate data that they want to report on, whatever use that may be for.
I would add, like in the broker channel, a lot of the technology has been basically fraud prevention, right? So we are inputting information on the history of the house. We can pull very general information on, like, you know, does the existing owner have a private mortgage with, you know, a mom and pop, for instance, versus a MIC. Basically to prevent people from hyperinflating values. So like, what did you pay for it last year? What did you do to it? That's usually where the money I find the broker channel is really heavily investing in, is to speed things up. And again, for the realtors on the call, you know, they'll notice some deals, they don't need an appraisal, right? Like why is that? The data was good. It made sense for the area. If the previous data that had been inputted on that property is not good, an appraisal could be triggered. Or if it's over $1 million, you know, there's a bunch of different characteristics.
And that depends on the lender, right, Andrea?
Yes,
It's
100%.
Yeah.
So some lenders, privates and Bs, mandatory appraisals, all those things that can slow down processes. I don't see that changing because there's more, they're lending on the house, right? But that's where I see, like, and obviously technology, that's kind of where I see the big push on the broker channel is to, again, is more fraud prevention than anything else.
Interesting. I always wondered how they did that. I always wondered how certain homes, I knew there was a system. There clearly had to be a system where appraisals were foregone on a $400,000 house. But it's interesting.
Well, there's also like different terms, right? So like, you know, if I'm buying a house for $995,000 and I'm putting 10% down, chances are I don't need the appraisal. If I'm buying that house on the same street for $1.5 million, like $1,005,000, now I need an appraisal, right? Yeah, so it's annoying and frustrating. And if I was a realtor, especially, I'd be like, okay, what is going on here? But sorry
to cut you off, Andrea. I would also say for the audience that we have here, we need to understand the different silos of business and lenders that Andrea may be speaking with in comparison to us as a lender. You know, it's so important to really understand. This is where Andrea comes into play, and you guys as realtors can help her with this up front, is understanding the profile of the client. Does the client have a profile, and does that property fit a profile so that she can send it to a lender where she can get away with what they call an AVM. You don't need a full appraisal report. If that's the case, fantastic. Otherwise, if it's the profile of a B lender, your typical alternative lender, or a MIC lender like ourselves, we need a full appraisal report. And when I say profile, to Andrea's point, the profile of a client that comes to us today is very, very different than what most of you may think. If we were talking 20 years ago, most people would think everyone with poor credit is that's an automatic MIC client, right? A private client. We're seeing clients nowadays with 800 beacon scores. They pay their bills. It's just a function of regulation changes, the B20 rules that have pushed them from what they would have typically been as an A minus or even a bankable client. 5 years ago, they would have been an alternative B client, but today they're in our space. And again, it's not a function of anything they've done.
So can I follow up on that question? And then Richard, I promise you, I'm turning to you in 1 second. The government has spent a lot of 2019 and 2020 tightening mortgage rules, the plus $1 million and every the TDS and GDS ratio changes. God knows what, everything that has changed. Maybe they haven't changed TDS and GDS ratios. I don't know. I'm not a mortgage broker. I'm allowed to say things. Whatever. But they've instituted a whole bunch of changes that has effectively made it harder and harder and harder for people to borrow. Do you anticipate that, particularly given Richard's comments about the Q4 downturn that we can expect? So we have 3 good quarters, 1 bad. Do you expect that the government, given that real estate, if I'm correct, Richard, and what you're saying is that money continues to be plentiful until Q4, at which point pain starts, that means that real estate should technically not restrict until that time, assuming that that's correct. Given that that's the case, and the government doesn't like to see people putting their money into these assets seemingly as much as they once did 10 years ago or 20 years ago, do you think further government restrictions are on board? Andrea, for you as well. Andrew, anyone's feel free to answer, but Reaza, you probably are in the best position to do so.
I mean, at this point in time, what we're hearing on the street, there has not been any talk to that effect. The crystal ball, this is the issue. If we look back to last year, March of last year through to the end, we all thought, and most people thought, that the real estate market was going to fall off a cliff. And that did not happen. It slowed down a little bit. Activity slowed down. The realtor base had to adjust to working online, virtual showings, and everything else. But once all of that came back and everyone adjusted, it took off again. So to say, we were saying it was like a twilight zone. Unemployment was high, yet people are still buying, and they're buying at a rapid rate, multiple offers everywhere. So to say now going into this year, what's going to happen, it's so difficult to determine what is actually going to happen. We've not heard any talk about any more government restrictions being placed on the lending side. On the flip side, we haven't heard of anything to loosen it up either. And to Andrea's point, with the first-time buyers, we're pushing really hard for that segment because they were hurt the most. That we feel, anyways, they were hurt the most with the recent regulation changes.
Right.
So.
And sorry to jump in, but I find the regulation changes, some were good, some were they helped cushion us for what we're going through now. But they were never usually based on anything. Like when I started lending, you could do a 40-year amortization. Those people went through more hoops than anyone else. And CMHC would be the first one to say they weren't defaulting, like they weren't the problem, right? So they scaled back a lot of different programs preemptively, not because they were actually an issue, right? So the stated income programs that all banks used to have, when they scaled those back, those clients were paying. They were running businesses. Yeah, they weren't showing everything on paper, but they were paying those debts. And now all they've done is loosen the rules with lots of equity. So if you've got 35% down, there's a lot of things that we can get past and you can still get a really good rate. It's again, that first time buyer. And when you take that rung out of the market, that's what really worries me long-term.
But I think one thing that's not being talked about a lot, or it is talked to a certain extent, is the immigration numbers and everything else and what's expected of that moving forward. but also the quality of the people coming into the country as well. And they're coming in with money. They're coming in wanting to own property. It's not like when my parents came to this country in the early 70s or late 60s, with the typical story, $100 in your pocket and a suitcase. It's not like that anymore. We're seeing a very, very different type of person coming into Canada that's helping to drive the real estate market at the same time.
Totally agree, Richard. Do you, sorry, your hand is up there in the corner. That's so nice. What a nice little thing on Zoom.
I have a quick question actually for the finance guys before Richard. Sorry. So the stress test, when it was introduced last year, you had to qualify at a 2% higher mortgage rate. I'm assuming that's what it was, no?
Yeah, that was a couple of years back. Yes.
Okay. So then the rates dropped pretty significantly. So then wouldn't that gap be a lot wider now? And wouldn't 2021 lend itself to a lowered stress test maybe for buyers?
So they changed it to, they did lower the stress test a bit, but now it's still 479. And say, for instance, you want like a 5-year fixed, you're getting 1.5, right? So that's a huge difference in qualification to what you're actually going to be paying. So we'll see if the stress test drops a little bit further, but I wouldn't think it was going to drop a whole percent. Yeah, like it's not going to do anything that's going to significantly increase your pre-approval ability.
In everything that we're hearing, and we're looking at our sector, the government, although we love our sector, the government doesn't necessarily see it as the biggest and top priority on their plate right now. So we need to stay in front of them constantly about what the challenges we're facing as an industry. But I think it's going to be a slow burn before we see any real change.
And also too, like for the realtors, their clients are going to go through more hoops for every application because there is talk about more regulation, about spot checking files mid-transaction, which the banks are trying to avoid so much because that would really kill turnaround times, which are already bad. Like if you put a COF in if you need to, like it's not, like the turnaround time isn't great, but if they add this, extra layer, it's going to get that much worse. So the banks are trying to proactively really narrow down on files to make sure they're super clean so that the government doesn't add additional layers to the process and to the regulation, because they know, again, once it becomes unattainable to hit that 3 to 5 day COF and becomes so hard to buy a home, obviously the banks are worried about their profits, but we're also worried about the market as a whole.
Okay, guys, Richard, you had a question, but I also have a question for you based on what we're talking about here. So if you don't mind, why don't you ask your question and then let's.
I didn't have a question. I had more of a comment.
Yeah.
That I think with the lower interest, I actually think the government has done more to stimulate the real estate economy. So although everyone's saying, oh, the last half of the year was just this record year and it was a twilight and like Moses came to town, I'm not quite sure that was the case. I think the government intentionally stimulated it with its lower interest rates. It was effectively going to go to 0%, but it didn't go there quite yet. And I think that there is definitely a big elephant in the room here that I think one of you hit on it, that about immigration. I actually think that is what really in Toronto makes the market tick. And there's rumor right now that it's very close to tax for empty homes. So they're in their final reading in Toronto, where it will be a 15% tax on the value of the house on a per annum basis for having your house sitting vacant in Toronto.
Interesting. I just want to add in, as a lawyer, immigration into Toronto is everything. It explains what is transpiring, plain and simple. It is true supply demand that is existing in Toronto that is pushing up prices, because the immigrant, as Reaza mentioned, the immigrants that we are seeing who are coming into Toronto are high net worth tech-based immigrants, not the people who start at low-level jobs. And these people immediately want homes. It doesn't take a full generation to make them homeowners. And it's a different type of immigration classification that we presently have flooding into specifically the GTA market. which explains why so much growth and such heady growth has taken place. That's just my 2 cents. I might as well weigh in at some point. So Richard, I'm going to ask you one more question, then I'm going to turn to Andrew for a minute. Some of you may wonder why it is we have a trustee in bankruptcy here in a real estate discussion. After all, for those of you who are unfamiliar with a trustee in bankruptcy, first of all, A, good on you for actually maintaining excellent finances throughout your life, because you don't know what a trustee in bankruptcy is. But secondly, just to fill you in, Richard is the person that you go to when your investments don't work out, when your business fails, or alternatively, when you just don't have the ability to make your bills work. He is the person who is court ordered to take you through the process, consolidate your bills, and in some ways alleviate those bills. The reason we have him as part of the crystal ball is because there's a famous book called Wisdom of the Crowds. It was written by a guy named James Surowiecki. And what he said is that when you are all of a similar disposition, you generally aggregate and skew the same way. So we can all truly believe something collectively. And I can speak to Reaza, and I can speak to Andrew, and I can speak to Andrea. But really what I'm doing is speaking to the mirror, because we're all part of the same industry and we're all subject to the same trends. Richard is different. Richard has to deal with what happens when those trends are inaccurate. And so he kind of looks at this from a very different perspective than we do. And so his comments that Q4 is when a downturn is taking place is probably something you haven't heard from our industry colleagues. And I think that it's worth our time to spend a bit of time analyzing what he means there. And Richard, I'm going to turn it over to you, because what Richard is saying to us is you guys can have any heady expectations you like. We are expecting that there will be a bomb taking place at the end of Q3, turning down, which means that real estate will turn down. And this is from an objectively different industry than our own. So perhaps it's worth our time, given that this is a crystal ball discussion, for us to just listen a bit more to what Richard was talking about. And Richard, maybe you can tell us where you think the first cracks are going to appear. Of course, there's opportunity in downturn, guys. I mean, that's one of the reasons we care about this very much. So Richard, maybe you can tell us why Q4, what the sources are that are saying that, what the areas of weaknesses are expected to be, and more importantly, because we all have the glint in our eye of sitting at home and wanting to make money, how perhaps realtors, brokers, lawyers can capitalize on that.
So I'll start with the fact that in Q4, what we're, as I explained before, as the government programs wean, Ontario in general is made up of many small businesses. That's the backbone of the Ontario economy. And right now, many of those small businesses are closed. And if they're not closed, they're severely hampered. And that's from retail to movies, to hospitality, to restaurants. All the big sectors are having issues. And I really appreciated when I heard Andrew saying, we got to get family members to co-sign loans. Well, it works when the family member has a job or the family member has an income, but it doesn't work very well when they don't have a job and then the person applying doesn't have a job. So now we have no people with jobs and only equity in house. They have no retirement. In Ontario, I'd say the vast majority of individuals, another reason we're looking to Q4 is their retirement plan is the equity in their house. They don't have savings. Otherwise, they wouldn't co-sign. They would write their kid a check for $300,000 and say, here's your generous gift for when I die, but you're getting it while I'm alive. So they don't have that cash. So what they're doing is they're financing it against their house. So that's another reason why we're saying in Q4 they're going to have a problem. Another issue we're looking at is the number of people that got the CEBA loan, which is was $40,000, now $60,000 loan. A lot of companies that were cleaning companies, had small payrolls, little shopkeeper, they had a surge of cash. And when that runs out, they've got nowhere else to turn because their business isn't coming back. And retailers are laying off dramatically. Retailers are laying off dramatically. So job loss is going to be extensive. People coming from abroad, as we discussed the immigration issue, it's challenging right now because they can't get through the government system. Although they have every right to be here, we want them here, they're having trouble getting here. And a big issue, and it's being lobbied right now, I believe, by some of your professional organizations, is this vacancy tax. It's causing a dramatic issue for those people to want to invest millions of dollars in a property to only find out that they're going to have to continue to pay it. Toronto just announced yesterday it had $1 billion shortfall, so they've got to look for the money somewhere. There's a thought that after this financial crisis, when they do their next budgets in April, there's a thought that capital gains tax might go from 50% to 75%. So all these.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, all these issues are looking to us to say, we got a problem, Sergeant. How do we fix the issue?
I'd actually like to turn this to Andrew for a minute. Not Andrea, Andrew. Andrew, you're the data guru here. You aggregate this stuff and breathe it like water. With regards to what Richard is saying about a vacancy tax, do you have any stats or do you have any sentiments based on data that would speak to what that would do to particularly, I guess, the condo market, but other markets as well?
Yeah, certainly. So we look at vacancy rates and absorption rate and months of inventory as three of the leading indicators for where the market is heading. And there tends to be a time lag from when that data is reported to when it's actually realized in the real market. So we had a moment in time where, for instance, my area, downtown Toronto, had a massive vacancy rate, and it wasn't because investors were buying spec units and then just leaving them for for the idea of it appreciating in the future. So they didn't care whether or not the unit was cash flowing in the immediate term or not. It was a lot of people that needed to in the beginning of COVID, and there was also an influx of Airbnb units that could no longer be used as vacation rentals or short term. So the market got flooded with units, and there was a lot of vacancy in that interim period. It went as high as, I believe it was 4.14 months of inventory, which is treading on a brutal oversupply. And that actually is what pushed the prices down for the rental market in Toronto. So at this moment, it doesn't look nearly as good as an investment for real estate investors that are looking to cash flow properties. In fact, it's a horrible investment right now. But what's happened in the last couple months, there's been a bit of an inflection point, and I'm not sure what to attribute it to, but for whatever reason, the months of inventory has swung the other direction, and now we're sitting at 2.78 months, which is a very healthy rental market. That trend, I think, is going to continue, but what I would suggest for my prediction in 2021 is as borders get opened and you get a lot of permanent residents, high-skilled workers, foreign students that are going to be at U of T and all the other various schools, these vacancies will get swallowed. And then there's going to be a mad dash to get units again downtown, and that's going to drive prices in the other direction equally as quickly as they dropped in the condo market. Sorry, Mark, I was also going to piggyback on Richard's thoughts of small business and commercial retail spaces being closed down. Huge contributor for Toronto market and Ontario in general. But what I'm seeing right now from the data is that a lot of these spaces are being gobbled up by the big tech companies. I'm looking right now at a few key points I have here. Amazon took another 100,000 square foot office space right by Union Station. Shopify took an additional 90,000 square feet the other day, now totaling 350,000 of office space in the downtown core. Google took another 400,000 square feet space in King West at 65 King. They basically took 18 floors. That's not contributing to the commercial retail space on the ground floor. You're seeing those mom and pop shops and the brick and mortar shops that are closing. But I see right now there's a convergence where these big companies are taking up more space in the core in preparation for the market to swing back up again. And these small businesses are being pushed out. And I think that's a function of efficiencies. If you run a business that is not offering convenience, efficiency, and great prices or some attributed value, you're being pushed out of the market. And it's something that Andrew Yang, one of the presidential candidates, was talking about in 2017. Truck drivers are going to be replaced by automated trucks, self-driving trucks. And I think this whole COVID experiment has fast-tracked a lot of these big swings that we're having in terms of technology and what businesses are getting the larger piece of pie in the downtown core, for instance.
And Andrew, can I ask you one follow-up question, if you don't mind? Just harking back to the first bit of what you were talking about. That was fascinating, by the way. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
That was really very not that everyone's comments haven't been fascinating, but I like that. That was very interesting. Just out of curiosity, we saw a mass problem when Airbnb was forced to exit the market. We've learned that they are effectively what is an 800-pound gorilla that has the ability to affect markets. It's likely that mass vaccination pursuant to government plan is going to be August. And it's understood by most people that that is a conservative estimation so that they can beat that. So we're expecting May or June for mass vaccination. And at that point, it's likely that we are then going to be back to normal, which means Airbnb goes back to normal, which means the 800-pound gorilla re-enters the market. What do you think that might do in conjunction with the influx that you've talked about that we've already experienced? What do you think that portends for downtown realty?
Well, it's funny. They just pushed out their main competitor, VRBO, downtown. This is literally a week ago. They pushed them out. I was getting YouTube ads about VRBO right up until last week, and then suddenly they pulled the lights out from under them. As you know, as Airbnb suites re-enter the market, I mean, I still think it's disproportionately for people visiting the city that want to tour the city, and it's not really a long-term housing solution downtown. But there will be instances, for instance, right now, Airbnb has offered extended stays on the site for units on the site for a much reduced rate that would be, in fact, competitive with long-term rentals downtown Toronto and Mississauga and all the other major markets. So what they've done effectively is they've pivoted their model and found a way during COVID to still be profitable. Not really, but they're trying to be profitable. And they might have found a whole new segment of the market that they could tap into. And now essentially landlords and investors are going to be competing with the 800-pound gorilla. So.
All right. Well, that's you know what, that seems like a really good way to end things, because that's kind of hopeful for those of us in real estate. What I'm going to do here, guys, with your permission, is I'm going to give everyone one last chance to give their last prognosis and crystal ball. I'm going to start with Richard, because Richard, I know, has a hard stop at 11 and he's going to disappear right after he finishes speaking. Then I'm going to turn to Reaza, then Andrea, then Andrew. We'll get your last thoughts on where things are going. And I just want to sincerely thank, I know we didn't have much time for questions from the audience today, but that's because we have a large panel here. I just want to thank everyone for attending. We will be back to our normal educational sessions starting probably next week, if not the week after, and we'll be doing that until next year's Crystal Ball session. So Richard, I'm going to turn it over to you. Please feel free with last words, and then Reaza, you're welcome to continue from there.
Thank you, everyone, for having me. As a licensed insolvency trustee, I certainly hope I can show a positive outlook. And I do know that we are the ones that are able to help in times of need. So, you know, we can often make a project work when it looks very grim. So reach out, talk to Mark. He can put you in touch with me. And I wish everyone the best in 2021.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for your attendance. Really appreciate it. Reza, do you want to give us your predictions as to what's going to happen in your space in 2021? Last bit.
I think what we're seeing, the trend is going to continue in our private lending space. It has consistently gone up year over year, the volumes that we're seeing. And as I mentioned before, for many different reasons, whether it's government regulations, whether it's the way people are reporting their self-employed income, potentially the type of employment that they have, whether it's seasonal or part-time, that doesn't qualify them at the traditional lenders. So I believe that that shift will continue. And my hope is that everyone on this call and everyone in your industry can understand where the opportunities are there for you and your business when you come across these clients. You know, you have a great broker on this call right now, Andrea. as an example, when I speak to realtors or mortgage brokers, I said there's phenomenal opportunity to continue doing business. It does not all have to go. The only option is not the bank. We are a very viable option to get your clients at least into the market. And remember, we're short term. We're not a long-term solution. So get your clients into the market, have them start building their net worth, and then utilize your mortgage broker to move them into better financing situations. That's where we come into the picture and can help as well. So for any of your clients that are in trouble like that or in strange situations, us, anyone else in our space, absolutely can help. But I believe it is going to continue, as we've all talked here, for the first 3 quarters of the year. The last quarter of the year, we quite frankly don't know, because what we don't know is what plans the government has in supporting the economy. And that's going to be a key factor.
And I just want to point everyone out to Reaza's professionalism, because the mark of a professional is someone who can both answer your question and put in a plug for services. We should all learn about this. Awesome. That's the way it should be. Reza, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. No, not to knock it. Everyone should be doing that. All right. Andrea, why don't you hit it up?
So I think 2021 is still going to be a really strong year. I really took in what Richard was saying, and I don't think the Band-Aids that have been put on place are really going to start peeling off until 2022. And possibly even 2023. I do think there's also a lot of people that are still on the sidelines. There's a lot of people who, if prices were to decline, would finally be able to buy. There's a lot of people who are waiting for that, and we're seeing that with calls that I'm getting for like, hey, is the condo market in Toronto really down? Should I pick up a condo? Like, can I invest, right? So am I worried about the housing market falling off a cliff? No, but I don't know what the government is going to do, because they've made choices before that at the time didn't seem warranted. So that is really the variable that we can't predict. But from what we're already seeing in an unusually busy January, 2021 is looking really strong. And I don't think we're going to really see those the effects of what happened for another year or two.
Okay, thank you. Now, before I turn to Andrew, I'm going to do his plug for him, just because Condo Mapper is actually an amazing site. So if you guys haven't been to Condo Mapper and you crave data, please check out Andrew's website. It's designed around data and feeding industry information to all of us. And it is an active resource that is going to be amongst the best prop techs assists for realtors out there. So now, by the way, Andrew, now your check is now cashed.
Yeah, basically. Nice.
Hit us up. What's your prognosis for the future?
All right. So I'm the ultimate bull, and Miss Cleo is going to make a few predictions. I think freehold is going to soar this year, like it has been. If we look at a house that sold in Mississauga 2 weeks ago at Central Air Mills, it had somewhere between 68 and 72 offers on it. That tells me someone picked up the home. Now there's another 67 plus people looking for the exact same home in a very tight grid. Freehold is out of hand, and the reason for that, people want more space, so they're leaving the condo segment, going to freehold. What's happening though is there's a gap, there's a delta between the cost of a freehold and condo, and it's jumped about 0.4, and so right now it's a lot more expensive by comparison to buy a freehold, and you're competing a lot more. I think buyers are going to get discouraged in 2021, and they're going to return to the condo market, and they're going to be looking for large, oversized, unique, distinct spaces in the downtown core and specifically in the suburbs. You're going to find a lot of people searching out there. Condos are already rebounding, both for sale and lease. We're seeing a huge inflection point for condos for sale. There's a lot of people re-entering the market, and they seem to be going for, late 2018 prices. So there's a huge value proposition there. The other items that I'm looking at right now, rental, yeah. So there's going to be investors looking to deploy money this year. Much like people's savings have been accruing. I'm talking the high net worth and people that have additional disposable income. They're going to be looking to deploy their funds this year. And that goes anywhere from equities, blue chip tech stocks, to gold, Bitcoin, WTI oil trading futures, and real estate. And I think there's a few segments of the market where there's huge value, but I believe that land assemblies, vacant lots, high density development potential, severing lots, these type of markets are going to be just flooded with buyers this year. So I expect a lot of high net worth investors to return to the market and deploy some of that money they've been saving for this.
Amazing. Well, guys, you know, it's too bad we don't only get to do this once a year and that the rest is pretty much educational, but I'm going to cordially extend an invite back to you for the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. I enjoyed this very much. I got a lot out of it. I hope everyone else on the channel did as well. As always, this will be posted on our Facebook site in a couple of hours and made available to everyone for review. And I just want to sincerely thank everyone. It's now 11 o'clock. I want to sincerely thank everyone for their time. I hope you guys got as much out of it as I did. And really, you guys are industry experts for a reason. You guys really, you took the ball and ran with it. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the invite.
Cheers, guys.
My best.
Cheers.
Bye.